Well, good morning, everyone. I'd like to thank our hosts today and Dean and Mark for their very prescient remarks on China's strategy and their evolving technical capabilities to implement that strategy. I'd like to put their comments in our theme today in a little bit of a bigger picture view. And I think we start with the discussion that Dean and Mark have so aptly made of the purposes of China's strategy development in the strategic arena and their significant investments in the capability and equipment to implement that strategy. Within the context of a rather recent significant policy thrust from the Obama administration, that would be the pivot to Asia. As we know, the pivot is designed, or at least rhetorically thus far, to both assert U.S. interests in the Asia-Pacific region, to communicate our resolve to potential adversaries in the region, to include both Russia and China, but also to reassure the protection of our own growing economic interests with the evolving economic powers in that region, and to reassure our own allies of our resolve to meet our treaty commitments and other defense commitments. Our ability to meet China's space security challenge and its BMD capabilities is an important part of our ability to reassure our allies that our capability in that region, which is intended to grow, as you know, can be maintained and be militarily and politically viable. However, I think in the context of today's discussion, it's important to pursue the pivot strategy in a way that both reassures our friendly countries and both the Russians and the Chinese in a fashion that does not lead to miscalculation down the road as our military buildup and political, diplomatic offensive ramps up in the years ahead. This will require very deft diplomacy by the United States and a clear communication strategy over a period of many years. Dean has made the point in his presentation that one of the objectives or one of the Chinese views of deterrence is that it's not simply to deter action, but also to compel an adversary to submit to Chinese will. He used the word shake the adversary's will to resist. And as we pursue our own counter space defense, space control, however you want to put it, capabilities, pursuing these in the right way will be vital to demonstrate our own credibility and determination not to submit to any adversary's ability to undermine those capabilities such that we are forced to make significant policy changes detrimental to the United States and detrimental to our allies. Dean has mentioned that the Chinese see their own military space capability as posing a threat to both U.S. military and commercial assets and infrastructure in space for the purposes possibly of demonstrating a significant raising of the costs of any conflict with China between the United States and China. I think Dean alluded to making us think twice about coming to the aid of a certain island off of China. So this raises the question of how our own space control, military space capability can meet the Chinese challenge and communicate our capability and do it in a way that with the psychology needed to both manage our relationship with China in the space realm and reassure our allies. We face constraints in our ability to pursue any number of military programs and capabilities to achieve the objectives that I've just laid out. As many of you know, our own military space, and especially ASAT, direct descent ASAT in particular, capabilities have long faced restrictions. These are largely, in my view, political concerns about the militarization of space, the instigation of a space arms race, more recently the creation of space debris, and even more recently the budgetary challenges our country faces. Regardless, given the increasing awareness of the military space issues we're facing, including anti-satellite threats and competition around the world in ballistic missile defense capability, we have made increasing investments in our ASAT capabilities in particular. We are still, I think, in a rather nascent stage in this capability. Our capabilities are largely limited to holding at risk assets in lower Earth orbits. Programs like Skyguard, which is an offshoot of the Thel laser, show some promise. Variants of the Standard Missile 3, as you know, have had an engagement event in recent years. The THAAD, Ballistic Missile Defense System, future variants with higher altitude show some promise. But in all these cases, again, they do raise the political considerations. There are limitations of geography. There are limitations of where they can be based. In some cases, the pivot to Asia may relieve some of those geographic constraints. And I think that given the considerations of the direct descent capability that adds to our space control capability, more recently, scholars, including Mark, have been looking at other, shall we say, lower profile, less brute force approaches to dealing with the some of our space control assets. I think one of the first things, though, we need to do is to redouble our efforts to restrict and constrain China's ability to acquire our strategic military space and aerospace technologies, which are helping the Chinese advance their aerospace capabilities across the board. Some of you may know I served on the House Select Committee on China, where we looked at China's strategic technology acquisitions, space and aircraft. And to my view, despite our attempts to implement legislation and other procedures to disrupt China's ability to acquire our strategic and aerospace technologies, their global acquisition capability has only grown. I think it's a problem that has somewhat fallen off the radar screen since the late 90s, and it needs to get back on. We're also looking at, in the lower profile realm, less provocative, if you will, passive defenses, and implementing some of them, like lens shuttering on our satellites. We also understand from Chinese writings that they will attack our space infrastructure at all levels. That includes ground, sea, space. We need to make all of the above more survivable. We should consider, and certainly are, I believe, working on cyber disruption capability, again, a more low-profile approach using modern technologies versus the direct ascent, brute force approach with all of its political difficulties. Another thought, rapid reconstitution of small satellites in case our ASATs are attacked. That's been studied for some years and may require investment. An area to look at in our academic and research institutions and universities are making strides in what are called nanosats. Those are satellites that are about 10 pounds, can be used for constellations, for communications capabilities. That's a nascent capability, but shows promise, and the leaders in that area are not in the Department of Defense, in my view. They're in our academic and research institution capability, and that's something we should carefully survey. Finally, we might need to move away from reliance on traditional space systems for missions like surveillance, communications, and others. There are, especially which have been advanced through our wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, as you know, very advanced unmanned air vehicle capabilities that have come online, and even more advanced high-altitude systems under research. These systems have some capability to replace some of the missions or at least supplement some of the missions currently performed by our more traditional communications and other types of satellites. So those are a few thoughts on specifically aimed at developing a more robust military space capability for the United States, and one aimed at countering what Dean mentioned of the Chinese desire to compel us to submit to their aims and objectives by being able to hold at risk our space infrastructure, commercial and military. On the BMD issue, I think that China's extensive arsenal of shorter, medium, and longer range ballistic missiles for theater applications, frankly, has gotten to the point that it compels us to consider new methods of warfare. We are pushing back our assets in the region, for instance, to Guam. We are deploying Marines to Australia. We are thinking new thoughts because of China's ability to hold our traditional core facilities in Japan, for instance, at risk. And I think this portends some fundamental rethinking, which I think is ongoing in our national security community regarding how to deal with this. So that's in the realm of the shorter and medium-range ballistic missiles. In the longer-range strategic ballistic missile realm, which we haven't spoken about very much today, I see little chance that we will make the investments necessary to blunt a significant or large-scale Chinese strategic strike. However, I do think major investments need to be made in our discrimination capabilities, both at the theater and strategic ballistic missile realm. This is a long-term challenge we have faced. It remains a significant challenge. And were China to use a small-scale strike or threat of a strike that might be manageable by future iterations of our strategic ballistic missile defense capability, our discrimination capabilities would be absolutely vital to mounting an effective counter to any such attack. And communicating that capability could provide a useful deterrent message to the Chinese. And finally, I've given you a bit of a laundry list of options to look at, maybe outside the more traditional realm of some of our space control approaches. But as we're all aware, the Defense Department in our nation is operating in a realm of very significant fiscal constraints. The Department of Defense fiscal environment is only going to decline and be more constrained. So I think that obviously Department of Defense and others in the community will face very difficult challenges in any approaches that we will adopt. Paper programs, programs that are on view graphs, programs that are in the most nascent stage of development are probably the ones that are most at risk. So we'll have to be very careful where we, what baskets we put our eggs in as we consider the challenges we face that have been outlined today at this conference. Thank you.